Generally, I think it's really important as we go through this, not this talk, but just this whole shift with a respect for AI engineers, people working on it, mostly because if we don't show some respect and treat them as humans who are trying to do good, then they won't take us seriously. Then it becomes a war, and then there's nothing we can do about it. If we want to have any kind of participation in how they do anything, we need to work with them. That's my opinion on it. Is like, I don't like a lot of things that are happening. And I think that the only way to make that change is to kind of be in the room, be in the same room with them. And I won't be invited into that room unless they want me there. Because there's a lot of people who are really quick to just demonize an entire thing based on the actions of one, which is not a good thing to do. This is the type of behavior we've been fighting against for generations. Yeah. You treat every person by what they're doing, just like you treat every company by what they do. And an entire industry cannot be summed up by. Yeah. We're on the same page on this. This is mostly a message to people listening.
Well, I just want to encourage people in the machine learning community who have those different viewpoints to voice them, because it's important, and it'll also do a lot of good for artists to know that there are machine learning and AI people on their side, who sort of understand the viewpoint that they're coming from.
That within those data sets, they found non-consensual porn, ISIS executions, child porn. Ars Technica reported there was some, they found medical record photos in there. There's just all kinds of stuff that isn't just affecting artists and just utilizing artist data and images, but it's also an issue for the general public. So people within the AI industry are actually really, really upset at the way that these things have been used. Not all of them, of course. Some of them will be like, it's on the internet, which, we can use it, which is kind of incorrect.
They're doing it because they're trying to get to utopia, which I was like, what? What? The whole art AI thing was an accident.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to do that. To them, that's not even part of the utopia that they're going towards.
Yeah.
It was an accident that happened because they were trying to do a much bigger thing. They're trying to get to AGI. They're trying to get to artificial general intelligence. This is when AI can do whatever a human can do, and then you multiply that by 1 trillion times, now you have 1 trillion brains solving problems that we need solved. That's the theory. That's what they're going towards. And this whole art AI is, to most of the researchers, is like, oh, who cares? They don't even care. It's like a little speck in the bigger vision.
They're sure making a lot of money to knock it.
Are they?
Oh yeah. You can still have the research, and the research is still important, and it is utilized for medicine, for sciences, for things that'll propel us forward. That's fine. When we talk about the arts, in my mind, the current conversation is much different than, what they're claiming that they want to do. And it feels almost like, okay, you want to reach utopia by stepping on a bunch of people. I guess it's the way that I kind of see it.
Are you talking about replacing jobs, or is it the data?
I'm saying about the data collection aspect, but there are, I've had many conversations with many artists throughout this, especially around the world, and there have been people that have been affected by this.
Yeah, of course.
But it doesn't excuse what companies, because these, at the end of the day, still companies, they make a ton of money. What was it, specifically Stability AI was valuated at $1 billion and got $101 million in funding.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of money involved in this. And
but Carla, you say these numbers, and to most people listening, it's just these scary numbers that all of a sudden they equal big money numbers equals evil people, right? And it could be the case for some, but you can't just throw in big money numbers around and say that this is an argument for it. That is not a good thing.
There's a saying that goes be kind to individuals, ruthless to corporations. So when we're talking about for example, individuals, it's there has to be a kindness to it, because they're driven by their passions, they're human, they might not understand what's right, what's wrong, because their frame of mind is completely different, and that makes sense. But a corporation as a whole is still a combination of people driven by profit motive, and that to me feels like
I personally wouldn't want to jump to that until I meet the person making those decisions at that company.
If they really believe that their end goal here is to create an artificial general intelligence with actual consciousness, that is to say, the biggest revolution that has ever occurred to human beings, then you step on an unbelievable series of ethical landmines, including the classic alignment problem of, does this thing have the same values as human beings? I don't see a good reason to trust that a small group of people at the tops of these companies should be resolving the alignment problem on general artificial intelligence when they are seemingly unwilling to listen already today to the desires of human beings, in this case artists, about what they already think machines should be used for.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a weird assumption to make, to think that they're going to change their tune once the gravity expands. I'm very worried about something like that.
Stephen's right. Regardless of who it is, you cannot give so much power to such few people.
I think they would agree with that, though.
Yeah, even if their heart is in the best place.
They don't really have a choice to not move forward with it, which is not an excuse for doing unethical things. But they do have to try to go very fast, because if they don't, like, that doesn't mean that humans won't. China and Russia are still moving as fast as they can on this. And they're not, I mean, I'm sorry, but like, I don't think they're going to do it ethically. Okay. So that the problem doesn't go away if we convince Silicon Valley to do it ethically, which we still should try to do. But the problem will not go away because we have no control over what China does.
I think to me, that's just not even a consideration.
Well, why not?
There's for sure going to be plagiarism occurring in other areas of the world, but that doesn't give a company here in the West and the US and the EU and all that open,
No, it doesn't.
to do it. And furthermore, like, we should not live our lives ethically or unethically or allow like potential disregard for existing, law, frameworks just because other countries don't. But the thing that still kind of really pisses me off is that we're talking about something that could have been done ethically from the beginning, and we would have never had this discussion to begin with. Why didn't these companies, why didn't all these fools just gather public domain data? There's a ton of great stuff there. I mean, come on, all the golden age illustrators are there. Grab public domain data, build their models off of that, and any expansion from that, doing it via licensing or something that's more ethical. And so to me, that could have been the beginning. That could have been how these technologies and how these models could have been defined by. It's like, oh, they're really interesting technology and they're built on ethical sources. Let's see how this can benefit us. And let's see, let's take that next step towards whatever was great. But that's not what happened. And so when I hear all these, oh, but this is leading to like, that they don't even want to do this. When I hear, oh, but other countries are doing it. To me, it just sounds like reasons why they couldn't be ethical to begin with. And I'm just not convinced by that.
The way they're framing that, it is clearly, it's a narrative that allows them to get permission from people to be like, oh my God, yes, I'm afraid of China. Yes, please do whatever you want. But I think they're arguing that we're in some sort of race that they're not. It's foreign affairs people who should be saying what race we're in China with. It has nothing to do with them. I'm not compelled by that argument at all.
But we do know that they acquired and profited from data that wasn't theirs. And that's a really horrible precedent for any company to set. I know people are scared of governments, but I'm also scared of like Google making their imaging or whatever. And that's based off of Lion. So the Lion data set, that's the one that, Stability AI funded. That's the one that has all kinds of data that's copyrighted, that's private, and so on. And so that concerns me very much. Yeah. It's not just governments, it's governments alongside the input of affected communities and scientists, researchers. It's a conversation, because at the end of the day, that's government's function.
Yes.
The quintessential problem with our current government as well, where it's like, yes, we do have a huge money problem where money just makes an influence in government and is a very corruptible force. However, I also just don't want to demean the power of getting to know your representatives. I don't want to demean the power of advocating for an issue. I don't want to demean the power of organization and being like, oh, you took this money from this company and that's on the backs of all the artists that are in your district.
Yeah.
And it sometimes does. Big companies are concerned about PR, right? And if they have bad PR, their bottom line gets affected, so they're more willing to make changes. And I think it is important also to just talk to people. There are still humans that are in there, of course, and are willing to do the right thing. But for me, it's one of those things where it's like that in my mind, doesn't seem nearly as effective as pushing for legislative action. But hey, all of the above, if it works, throw it.
How would it be more effective to meet your legislators than to meet the engineers and the people working on it right now?
Okay, so number one, a legislator can put forth a legislative agenda, can push for something to be turned into a law, can push and give resources to research. An engineer that works on this, well, it depends on who the engineer is. Is it someone that's just working on a team? They might not have a lot of power and a lot to say. Let's say you're talking to the founder or you're talking to the CEO, and they'll say, well, we're not gonna do this anymore. Like some of,
That's how they'll do it.
We're just not gonna. Well, okay, practically, how does this work? Remember, AI cannot forget once the AI model has been trained. So if you are, like, let's say, go to like Midjourney or Stability or any one of these companies and say, hey, I think you should do the right thing. My question is, they know the problems already. Why haven't they already? Because in order to fix it, they probably have to destroy what they have right now and build something completely from scratch. And at the end, they haven't been receptive to that. So it's not to say, oh, this is happening because these conversations haven't happened. They've happened over and over, whether it's from outside influence of artist communities or from even their own industries in the form of, ethic advocate.
DeviantArt.
I would love to. Okay. I'm sorry, but their opt-out tools are nonsense, and it is deeply hypocritical that DeviantArt would launch their tool using the ill-gotten data that is already used to train Stable Diffusion and then turn around immediately and claim that they are against that unethical data. It is hypocrisy, plain and simple.
It's silly. How did they not think this was going to be a bad idea?
A practice that technologists and Andy Bio calls data laundering. So it's basically the practice of companies utilizing nonprofits or non-commercial research in commercial purposes. And what this does is that shields companies, or kind of like removes companies from having to acquire this data that they normally would not be able to acquire for commercial purposes. One of the reasons why all of this is really, really upsetting is because even Stability AI recognizes how bad this is. Stability AI released a music model called dance diffusion, is that they actually kept copyrighted data away from the training data sets for dance diffusion. And they said the following: because diffusion models are prone to memorization and overfitting, releasing a model trained on copyrighted data could potentially result in legal issues. By the way, overfitting is a technological term that means the generated result of an AI model is identical or near identical to training data. And so if Stability AI released a model, their music model, that contains no copyrighted data, but their visual model has that, then why? Why did they give their music model that consideration and not their visual model that? And why would DeviantArt decide, oh, this is a great idea? It's bonkers. And it's a misuse of something that was exclusively, under the premise and pretext of being for research. And that's why it's able to gather copyrighted data and private data, the misuse of that in commercial purposes. And and I just think it's very, very unethical and potentially illegal depending on where in the world you are. When humans transitioned from utilizing horses to cars as mode of transportation, the car is an immensely powerful, machinery, far more than a horse. So infrastructure needed to change, laws needed to change, regulation had to happen.
Oh, yeah.
We had to take a lot of consideration in order to ensure that this new technology wasn't harmful. And I think that's the same place here. There's a way to kind of shift this so that it isn't harmful, so that it isn't unethical. The first step is to ensure that the more unethical companies are held accountable, or that the practice as it currently is seen as a no, where it's like a no good company or no company will engage in this because it's just too risky. So pushing companies in general to just really, really lean into that public data, or truly opt-in data, where you say, yes, I want to be a part of that because that choice was taken away. After that, and we have something more ethical, then comes a different conversation, and that's more of a labor issue in my mind. Mm-hmm. That's more of what kind of potential protections can governments offer to ensure that their artists, their creative workforce isn't completely decimated, because there is a potential for that. There is totally a potential for a company to say, hey, we have had our artists work here for 10 years. We're just going to build a model, and then we're going to let everybody go and just stay with the model.
So this becomes a huge problem that I don't like. How do you think a government could fix this? Let's say that once this is possible, it's possible for not just art jobs. It's possible for every industry. And now we're talking about like millions and millions and millions of jobs suddenly being taken over by AI, and the government has to offer protections. What are we talking about?
So the way that I could see it is we're going to need some very creative legislation that tackles the newness of all this in an inventive way. So for me, I would say implement something like, for example, percentages, like say, depending on which industry you are, a certain percentage of your labor force can be AI tools. So for example, if you're in like medicine or sciences, that's taken into consideration. It's a very large percentage. But if it's something like the entertainment industry or things that are creative, that are, not menial jobs, that are like truly, truly like wonderful creative jobs, then say, hey, listen, 2% of your workforce, has to be AI or something, and that's the limit. Also need to completely revisit what artists own versus what they don't own. Like, for example, work for hire contracts will need to change, so that, for example, to say, hey, you as a company, you have the right to use that, you have all these rights, but you do not have the right to use that in an AI model, correct? Like, you do not have the right to take that away from me, because then you could leave the company, and the company could potentially generate imagery that looks like you still work there indefinitely. So we'll probably need labor protections against that too.
Yeah.
So
it's a nice thought. Yeah. Instead of hiring a person, is they would just hire another company that's abroad that uses AI. Like, there's gonna always be loopholes.
It's an internal game of cat and mouse, and that's how it's been with any kind of law, or that any kind of industry that engages in something that's slightly unethical.
I'm going to come back to my basic point, but if Evan's right, I have no idea, right? I'm not a machine learning person, and I have heard to the contrary from people. But if he's right, I want to put out a public message to everyone who's working on text-to-image models. Make the open source Creative Commons opt-in version. That is excellent, as Evan says, because all commercial companies will use it instead, because it's not fraught with legal issues surrounding copyright and privacy and everything like that. So that's my little piece of advice. Do that. That's a better idea. It's a better product. And if it's not the case, if we reset like that and it's not as good as Stable Diffusion, which has run roughshod over the best art of the current era, then to get back to Stable Diffusion levels will require a huge transfer of value back to artists in the intervening years. In order for them to get back to that 5 billion plus data set ethically, they're going to need to pay artists ostensibly a lot of money, unless artists, fail to advocate for themselves and things like that, which is definitely a thing. But if they do it right, there will need to be a huge value transfer that I think, considering what these people are talking about, when you hear someone like Ahmad Mustaki of Stable Diffusion saying that he's going to solve images, it sure sounds like that shouldn't be cheap. It sure sounds like that should cost a lot. Like you should value the data that's in the training set and pay for it in a way to license it. So I think it's difficult to wave away what happens in the arrival period to the ethical AI. And I think that artists stand to, yes, there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen in the future, but they can create value off of this, make new careers off of this, make money off of this, hedge for the future. And if it's all truly ethical, if they're against the whole idea, they don't have to offer up their work. It's like, all right, well, at least my style's always solid,
There's a big issue that AI currently has, and that in machine learning programs that, models that currently have it is like, they cannot forget. There's no real way to forget. So like, that's something that needs to be solved before we reach to this ethical place where they do have things that are built on public domain and they do want to license work with artists. Because let's say you license your work to a company and the company is found to be in breach of your contract and you say, all right, that's it, I'm done, I'm leaving, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, if the model was trained with your work, tough luck, it can't really forget it. Because remember, even if your name isn't used as a prompt, it can make associations with your work with other things. So it can still utilize it to generate new things. So just wanted to add that little say that the future of artists, me personally, if this is left as it is, I think we are in a lot of trouble. But this is why this particular moment is so extraordinarily pivotal. Being able to hold companies accountable and not give quarter to arguments that are like, oh, hey, we couldn't do this unethically, because no. We really, really, really need to keep our eye in the game and say, hey, this could have been done ethically. It wasn't done ethically. They know it. They're profiting from it. What do we do? Once again, there's going to be various initiatives, both legislatively and by litigation.
There is a huge amount of fuel for this conversation because it is a data acquisition conversation. And if we keep it as practically minded as possible on the data acquisition, this is relevant to everybody, not just artists. I agree. When you look at it just through the artistic lens, we get a little bit browbeaten. But there is a real robust conversation to be had about here when you bring in everybody else, because everybody else is affected by precedents of how our data is acquired and what random companies are allowed to do or not do with it, and all of the loopholes that all of those precedents will produce, everything like that. Like Carla said, as you get educated, I know for me personally, as I learned more and more about the situation, I became more optimistic about things rather than more nihilistic. It did not take my energy away. It did not make me feel worse. It made me feel better. The more detailed viewpoint only revealed how deep the problems really run here. And I just have to tell you from my personal place, most human beings would agree.
A community together, embracing their power and standing up for their rights, that is forced to be reckoned with.
And I just want to remind everyone that this feeling that it's a boulder rolling down the hill and all of that, it's like, that is the result, for the most part, of Stable Diffusion being open source. It's the mistake of one group. It's the mistake of one company. Imogen, Midjourney, they're not open source. Not everyone can just get in there and crack the hood. You don't have the source code. If that hadn't happened, all of these closed door products would still be susceptible to regulation and changes and influence from what is legal and what isn't. That would not have released the boulder out into public in a personal way. People talk about it like anybody can make these things. It still costs $600,000 to train Stable Diffusion. And I don't think most people with that kind of money would be willing to drop $600,000 on something that they know is illegal.
Ethically, we collect data ethically. My opinion is it will not change it. We should still do it. We should still try to make it ethical. But I think that it's still going to keep improving. Give it 10 years. You could do it ethically, and it'll still get extremely good, and companies will still use AI instead of hiring artists.
I would argue that even if that is true, it is essentially irrelevant.
How? Artists are losing jobs. How is it irrelevant?
Because if the only thing that changes is whether it happens in 1 year or 10 years, it's still worth it to make it take 10 years. Because
yeah, I said 10 years, but I don't think it's that big of a difference, actually. Like, I think it's like 6 months to a year of a difference.
I would do this fight to add a week.
Sure, okay, great, but that's not what I'm getting at. I'm saying, what do we tell artists to prepare? You give them an extra week. How does that change the conversation? We still need to talk about the fact that, like, this is going to be a big deal. And I think telling artists that, hey, let's make it ethical, and then you're okay, I think that's wrong.
I think on this we agree.
Okay, so we remove the copyrighted stuff. We train it on public domain stuff. Then these companies, if they want a specific style, they hire a single artist. They can hire a single artist. They pay that one single artist $1 million. They train on that, and then that entire style is gone. So cool, one artist got paid a lot, but then everybody else who works at Legend or whatever in a specific style doesn't have a job anymore. That doesn't solve anything. That just gave one person $1 million.
I don't think that would singularly affect people's job at the degree where everybody loses their job. I would say that some people would lose their job. But this is where I say, and I kind of bring it back to, this is where you need labor protections. There's just no other way around it. If you don't have labor protections, then you do have a future where even at the most ethical implementation of this tool, it will take over artists' job. As it currently is, the reason it looks so good is because all of our works are in there, all of us. That's one of the reasons why, in my opinion, I think they refuse to not do it ethically, because data is gold to them. And in order to really generate anything that's worthwhile, you need a heck ton of data. And I just personally, I don't see it, but it's irrelevant because at the end of the day, we really do need regulation. This is a new technology and we're at the very early stages where precedents have not been set. So I could totally see a future where, hey, this corporation took my data and made an AI model and someone sued that corporation. And let's say everything goes according to like that person who sues plan and that practice becomes illegal. Then that has set a precedent that is now legal until it's challenged. And it's that constant dance of figuring out what these frameworks look like. And I, again, wholeheartedly believe that if the push is done correctly and the cases are done with care and court and alongside legislative pushes, that there's a lot that we can add here that can protect people in the long run.
If we're being honest here, no one knows what happens when this stuff goes to wherever it's got to go, court or something like that. No one knows. We can't claim that we know for sure. Life is chaos. And an art career has always been uncertain. But the case that we're making here is that it's got to have its day. We do need to figure it out. And we need to figure it out with sincerity. And we need to vigorously defend our position, which Carla and I are sitting here arguing is very defensible. It's a strong position. You know, there really is something in here to figure out. So yeah, we don't know. No one knows. Like Carla said, it's uncertain, but that certainly doesn't mean, I just don't, it's a non sequitur to say that uncertainty means we should then just pick a path from where we're standing now. It's like, we've got to figure it out. We've got to get it into court. We've got to discuss these things. We've got to organize them. We've got to see how it's going to shake out. That's what these systems are designed for. That's really it. I've got no problems with any individual end user of any of these products. I'm sure Carla does not either. It's a systemic problem and it should be dealt with systemically. I've spent very little of my energy around these issues thinking about what any one person has done. It's just, they're responding to incentives and stuff that's out in the world. That's not surprising to me. And I feel no desire to be angry at anyone. I think it's silly to be angry at other people in these conversations. You know, YouTube comment wars about these things are just, that's not the battleground, baby. Like, that's not where this needs to be going on. And
it does have an effect, though. That kind of battleground has an effect because
undeniably, yeah.
People from one side will be afraid to come address anything because they're afraid of the mob that could just destroy their reputation. And that's not good, I don't think.
I would avoid mobbing.
Yes, avoid mobbing, because we do need people from the AI world to come talk, which is why I'm bringing like Evan on, and I hope to bring more people on to actually talk to the art community without feeling like they're just going to be destroyed. And what's the point, right? We need to be sure that there's a safe place for us to have conversations. I don't know if there's any point of me saying this.
No, but this is why education is so important, right? Like, this is why truly understanding what these tools are, what the potentials are, what it is, what it isn't. It's very, very, very important, because then you allow yourself to separate a person from, the problem. You don't make it about that person. You don't make it vicious, you make it about the problem that's occurring. And again, if it's and it's important to also recognize, like, and have people go through those difficult conversations and say, okay, what is my role here? How can I improve this? So not everybody is also aware of the actual problem and how messy it really is. So sometimes it is a conversation of, hey, be aware of this and try to continue to push it into the, hey, be aware of this. And yes, I get it. You want to go to the utopia, but it cannot be done on the backs of artists or the public. And don't despair. Fall in love with your art now more than any other time, because art is not just about the end procedure. It's the process. It's its healing nature. It is meditative. It is so important to us as humans and as creative people. And again, just reach out to your community, learn, and let's have these difficult conversations, whether it's with each other or...
Anything that is dealing with how data is acquired is going to be relevant to everybody who is having their data acquired.
And so it wouldn't surprise me that something like this becomes a call for artists to gather resources together and really, 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 show the world that we can be just as fierce as the music industry. It's just, we needed the right motivation and something as existential as this. But we'll see.
Change the world together.
Sounds fun. Changing the world sounds fun. Yeah.